Yo, what's up, YouTube? Welcome back for another video. And I know a lot of you guys say Jordan's the GOAT. A lot of y'all say LeBron's the GOAT. Everybody have their opinion. You know, it just depends on what you look for in a GOAT. You know, it can be different reasons, but you know, it can be either Jordan or LeBron. You know, 'cause both are great players. Both were great players. LeBron's still playing, of course. Jordan was a hell of a player. LeBron's a hell of a player. But, you know, just different styles, different eras of the game. It just kind of harder to say who's really the GOAT. But I think the majority of people will say Jordan. But those people are probably people that seen Jordan more than they seen LeBron. Or they might say LeBron. It'd be the younger crowd that watched more LeBron than they have watched Jordan back in the day. So it's up for debate, but we're gonna get right to the video. It's a 32-minute long video. I don't think I'll ever reacted to a video this long. But we're gonna stop talking. We're gonna get to the video and make sure you subscribe if you're new. Hit the like button. Let's get either 23. No. Let me just get 10 likes. It's an easy goal to get. Just get 10 likes. Let's get it. When you're good at something, that you'll tell everyone. When you're great at something, they'll tell you. By Walter Payton. Oh yeah, shout out to Danger Productions for the video. Make sure I shout you out. I will leave the link down below if you want to watch the actual video without me commentating, reacting, or whatever like that. I just hope I don't get copyright for this, but if I do, oh well. Jordan. See, it's kind of hard for me to say who's the GOAT, but I would probably lean more towards Jordan. Cause his willing and desire to win games, no matter what. LeBron is a different type of player. But I'm an older guy, not too much older. I'm older than LeBron, but I'm younger than Jordan. So I watch both of them play in their primes. So I forgot what I was about to say.
Jordan versus LeBron. LeBron versus Jordan.
Why
it's a debate that has captured the
on?
public's attention for the last several years, especially after this moment in 2016 when LeBron James beat the Golden State Warriors to win the third championship of his career. In LeBron's own words,
that one right there made me the greatest player of all time. That's what I felt.
Reasons.
I was like, that one right there made you the greatest player of all time.
But did it?
Cause he won his.
Since that moment, simply
cause he won his fourth.
Or is LeBron destined
I'm not
to
gonna
finish his
talk
career
throughout the video. I'm not gonna be pausing and stuff.
We've
but
all heard the arguments from
he said you cause he won his.
supporters,
Hold on.
He's bigger,
Watch the
he's
video.
stronger, he's faster, he's more durable.
and from Jordan supporters.
Michael Jordan was merely 6-0 with 6 MVPs in the finals.
But the GOAT debate isn't as simple as the pundits make it seem. There are a number of factors relevant in determining the greatest basketball player of all time. In fact, I would say there are 5 things that really matter when determining the GOAT of any sport. These criteria are, in no particular order, accomplishments, longevity, winning, statistics, and what we'll refer to in this video as the eye test.
The eye test.
And to be the GOAT, you don't need to be the best in any specific category,
No, you
but
don't.
you need to be pretty good across the board.
Yeah.
So simply winning 7 championships,
pretty much like a
Robert Horry
complete
did,
player,
isn't enough to get you
all
into the
around player.
conversation. When we're finished with this video, it'll be plainly obvious that one guy comes out on top. But before we get started, I want to clarify that this is not a comparison of legacies. It's about who was the better basketball player. If we were talking about legacies, Jordan's is nearly untouchable. Not only did he lead basketball to global popularity, he helped transform Nike into an empire.
Yep.
Changed the way players played and how they dressed.
You see how I
And
put
he
Kobe
even
up
made it
there?
cool for guys to be bald. And while
R.I.P.
those things
Kobe.
certainly contribute to MJ's iconic status, they don't make him a better player on the court. So let's evaluate the criteria that matter, and we'll start with individual accomplishments. Take a look. Jordan had more regular season MVPs, twice as many finals MVPs, 9 more scoring
See,
titles,
LeBron had
and
one
several
scoring
more
title.
selections to the NBA's all-defensive
But a
team,
lot of people
including
say,
once
well,
being
because
named Defensive Player of the Year.
LeBron didn't try to score all the time.
LeBron
You know,
has more
Jordan
All-Star
had to, blah, blah,
appearances,
blah.
but that's
Yeah.
largely due to his having played more seasons. In fact, when taking into account retirements and major injuries, Jordan essentially played 13 seasons compared to 17 seasons for LeBron,
Yeah.
making Jordan's significant lead in accomplishments all the more
Because
impressive.
think about it. If
And
Jordan
that's
had
to say
played
nothing of
as
MJ's
many
brilliant
seasons
college
as
career, which saw him
LeBron,
twice named All-American and once awarded
definitely
College
be the
Player
GOAT.
of the Year, at a time when the country's best
No
players
doubt about
actually
it.
went to college.
Not saying he's not, but
So regardless of whether you're a LeBron fan or MJ fan, you have to give the accomplishments checkmark to Jordan.
yep.
The second criteria in our GOAT analysis is longevity. And this one is also a no-brainer, but this time in favor of LeBron. Not only has LeBron played more seasons in the league, but he's had a longer peak than Jordan. Jordan's peak lasted about 10 years, whereas LeBron's peak has lasted 16 years and is still going. And he's been incredibly
Really?
durable during that time, missing significant time to injury only in 2019. That said, the claim that LeBron has been much more
Yeah,
durable than
because
Michael has been a bit
sports
overblown.
medicine has
Considering that
evolved.
Jordan played in at least 80 regular
Like,
season
stuff
games
is so
11 times in
advanced
his
now
career,
than
including all
back before.
82 games an incredible 9 times. Compare
And
that
plus
to
he on
LeBron,
steroids
who
and
played
shit.
in at least 80 regular
Gotta know.
season games just twice, and in all 82 games just once. So both LeBron and Jordan get high marks for their durability. But durability aside, the bottom line is that LeBron has sustained his level of excellence for a much longer period of time than Jordan, which puts the longevity checkmark squarely in LeBron's corner.
Yeah.
That brings us to the
Yeah,
third
think about it.
criteria.
Jordan played in a tougher
Winning.
era too.
As we all know, Jordan won 6 championships. LeBron has won 3. Jordan is 6-0 in the NBA Finals. LeBron is 3-6. Yes, LeBron has
Oh,
made
this-
the finals
this is an old
9
video.
times compared to only 6 times for Jordan. But let's not pretend that making the finals is the same thing, or even close to the same thing, as winning a title. Take a prime example from another sport, the Buffalo Bills. They're the only team in NFL history to appear in 4 consecutive Super Bowls. But is there a single player or fan of that team that wouldn't trade all 4 of those appearances for just one Super Bowl win? Frankly, talk to any fan whose team lost the season's final
Oh my God,
game
it's okay, buddy,
and
it's
ask them how
okay.
they felt afterward.
It's okay.
Almost universally, their feelings are of sadness, anger, and disappointment. And that's just the fans.
He lost his
For
life savings on
players,
that game.
those feelings are only magnified. Listen to Charles Barkley talk about losing in the NBA Finals.
And I was just in shock when it was over because I had to, I was frustrated because I couldn't wheel my team past Michael and the Bulls. And it, first of all, I don't think I've ever gotten over it, number one. But that was traumatic and it's painful.
So we can all stop with this false equivalence between winning the championship and finishing runner-up. In the words of Herm Edwards,
You play to win the game.
True. You play to win the game.
Hello? You play to win the game.
now back to Jordan and LeBron. As mentioned, on basketball's biggest stage, the NBA Finals, Jordan was 6-0. LeBron was 3-6. And frankly, that doesn't even show how lopsided their records really are. In terms of individual finals games, Jordan was 24-11. LeBron is 18-31.
Damn.
And that's because in 4 of his 6 finals losses, LeBron's team hasn't even been competitive. Twice he got swept, and 2 other times he lost 4 games
I
to
forgot
1.
he got swept
That
twice.
includes being on the wrong side of
That's
the 2
tough.
most lopsided finals by margin of loss in NBA history. Of course, LeBron fans will tell you that the only reason for LeBron's poor finals record is that his competition was so tough. Ironically, some of these same fans criticized Jordan for losing early in his career to a Celtics team stacked with 5 Hall of Famers, and they conveniently gloss over the fact that LeBron reached the finals so many times in part because the competition in his own conference was so weak. During the vast majority of his career, LeBron played in what many dubbed the Leastern Conference because the
Leastern.
East was so much weaker than the West. On the other hand, during Jordan's playing days, the East was generally considered the stronger conference,
Yep.
as Jordan had to battle through hard-fought rivalries against the Bad Boy Pistons, Patrick Ewing's Knicks, the Shaq Penny-led
I'm about to say,
Magic,
yeah, the
and
Knicks
Reggie
too.
Miller's Pacers. That said, if you want to blame LeBron's failure in the finals
How'd
on the
that
level of his
pass get across
competition, I won't
that
argue
high?
with you.
Damn.
But let's also not blow it out of proportion. If you look at the average number of wins of their finals opponents, you'll see that LeBron's finals opponents averaged 60.8 wins per season, whereas Jordan's finals opponents averaged 61.2 wins per season. So as it turns out, both players face stiff competition in the finals.
Ooh.
But a big reason we don't hold the 93 Suns, the 96 Sonics, or the 98 Jazz in the same regard as some of LeBron's finals opponents is because, unlike LeBron's adversaries, Jordan's opponents never actually won the Larry O'Brien Trophy. Which goes to my original point, that the difference between winning the title and finishing runner-up is huge. And the reason those teams never won the title? This guy.
Of course.
Look, I'm not trying to say that Jordan's opponents were as good as the Warriors teams that LeBron faced 4 times in the finals. The truth is
Can't
that
compare
Jordan
them
never played a
different eras,
juggernaut
man.
quite like that. But there's a pretty good reason for that. Jordan's Bulls were the juggernaut. They were the team winning 70-plus games. They were the team with the target on their back every year.
Yep.
And as the Warriors showed us, that's not an easy place to be. As great as the Warriors were, they were never able to string together 3 consecutive championships. Jordan's Bulls did it twice. So what's the greater achievement? Beating the juggernaut?
That's crazy.
Or
It
being
three-peated
the
twice.
juggernaut? Or to be more specific, beating the juggernaut 1 time out of the 4 times you faced them? Or being the juggernaut year after year
Think about it,
after
nobody
year,
ever three-peated since
and then doing it
the,
again
the Bulls. I
year
don't think.
after year after year?
No, they might have.
There's no doubt that LeBron's victory over the 73-win Warriors was the highlight of his career. But it's not the first time that an underdog has won the championship, and there actually have been much bigger underdogs who ended up winning the title. But how many times have we seen a player lead his team to 6 championships in 8 years? Prior to
Dang,
Jordan's
that's tough.
Bulls, only Bill Russell's Celtics ever accomplished that feat in the NBA, when they incredibly won 11 championships in 13 seasons. However, back then, there was an
Out of
average of less
13
than 10
seasons?
teams in the league, and only a couple rounds of playoffs, so it was considerably easier to win a title.
Oh,
And no player,
that makes
not
a
even
lot
Bill
of sense.
Russell, ever had a run of winning 25 of 26 playoff series, as Michael Jordan did.
Damn.
And Michael's pattern of winning goes beyond the NBA. Let's not forget that Jordan has never won anything but gold in the Olympics, and he also earned an NCAA championship, in which he hit the first of 2 iconic championship-winning shots in his
Well,
career.
LeBron never did go to college.
All that is to say,
Yeah, I think-
when
did
it
he win
comes to
championship in high
winning,
school?
the checkmark clearly
least 1
goes
or
to
2.
Jordan. On to the 4th GOAT criteria, statistics. This one is a bit more complicated. I mean, how do you statistically evaluate 2 players who played in different eras under different
Tim.
rules at different positions? One way
Hey.
of doing it is to simply look at the 8 traditional statistics of basketball. Points,
Assists, rebounds, steals, blocks, field goal
percentage,
free throw percentage,
and
turnovers.
turnovers. And we'll focus on per-game stats rather than cumulative stats, since cumulative stats, such as total career points and total career assists, really speak to longevity, which is already its own category of the GOAT analysis. Per-game stats, on the other hand, is more of an apples-to-apples comparison. So looking at the 8 traditional stats, we
Ain't a
see
lot
that
of
Jordan leads
Cavaliers,
LeBron in 5 of them.
LeBron
Points per
was a
game,
beast.
steals per game, blocks per game, free throw percentage, and fewer turnovers. LeBron leads in the other 3, assists per game, rebounds per game, and field goal percentage. But that's a pretty simplistic way of looking at statistics. What if we instead turn to analytics? Probably the most well-known analytics stat is player efficiency rating, or PER for short.
But
This
Jordan's
metric
higher.
was created by respected basketball analyst John Hollinger to give an overall rating to a player's performance based on traditional stats like the ones we just mentioned. Jordan has led the league in PER 7 times, LeBron 6 times. Jordan has finished top 3 in PER 10 times, LeBron 9 times. In fact, Jordan has the highest career PER in both the regular season and the playoffs.
Damn.
Another
got him on
popular
that.
analytics stat
I
is win
kinda figured
shares.
it.
Jordan has led the league in win shares 8 times, LeBron 5 times. Jordan has finished top 3 in win shares 11 times, LeBron 6 times. And when it comes to win shares per 48
Jordan
minutes,
is the GOAT.
Jordan has the highest career rating in both the regular season and the playoffs. What about box plus minus? Until recently, LeBron was actually ahead of Jordan in career box plus minus. But after the 2017 season gave Russell Westbrook the greatest single-season box plus minus in history by a wide margin, the architect of Box Plus Minus realized that the stat was fundamentally flawed, so he made some changes to improve its formula. As a result, Michael Jordan now has the highest career Box Plus Minus in both the regular season and the playoffs.
I'm not surprised.
And lastly, what about value over replacement player, which on its face seems to favor LeBron James? Well, value over replacement player is a cumulative stat, and as previously noted, cumulative stats speak more to longevity than they do game-to-game dominance. That said, according to value over replacement player, Jordan owns 6 of the 9 greatest individual seasons ever played. And on a per-game basis, MJ's career rating in value over replacement player is the highest of all time in both the regular season and the playoffs.
I've never heard of stats
Are
like
you
this.
noticing a theme here? Not only does Jordan beat LeBron in every ratable analytic stat, he consistently ranks as the best ever across the board.
Damn.
Before we move on from analytics, I want to mention a lesser-known stat called game score, another brainchild of John Hollinger. Game score measures a player's performance in a single game, so it won't tell us who's had the better career, but it does provide insight into who's had the greatest games. Now, we only have game score
Jordan
stats
was
since
tough,
1983, so you won't see any mentions of Wilt Chamberlain here. That said, of the 100 highest game scores ever recorded, incredibly 19 of them belong to Michael Jordan. In other words, nearly 1 out of every 5 of the best single-game performances over the last 4 decades has been by MJ. That includes the highest game score of all time for Jordan's 69.18 rebound masterpiece. Comparatively, LeBron has had only 3 of the top 100 game scores. When discussing the GOAT, Nick Wright is fond of asking this question.
The aliens come down. You have 1 game to save humanity. Who's your first pick in the history of the world?
Well, Nick, I think we have our answer.
Not,
Now that I've
not
finished
LeBron.
drowning you in numbers, let's be real. Hardly anyone watching this video knows how to calculate PER,
Only 15 minutes to the
win
video.
shares,
Damn.
box plus minus, value over replacement player, or game score. And why should you? This is basketball, not Goodwill Hunting. So let's go back to the traditional stats that we all know and understand. But this time, let's add context to them. What do I mean by context? Well, some positions are simply better than others at racking up certain stats. Let's take rebounding as an example. In a vacuum, if we simply compare the number of rebounds per game of Brook Lopez and Jason Kidd, we might think that Lopez was the better rebounder. The truth is, relative to their positions, Lopez is statistically one of the worst rebounding centers in NBA history,
Damn, only
whereas
604?
Kidd is statistically one of the best rebounding guards in NBA history.
Yeah.
But even a poor rebounding center can grab more rebounds than a great rebounding guard solely by virtue of their roles on the court. So it makes sense that, to understand the context of a player's stats, we should compare them to the respective positions that they played. When comparing LeBron James to the other small forwards who have played at least 500 NBA games, this is where he ranks. Overall, that's pretty impressive. Now let's see how Jordan compares to all shooting guards who have played at least 500 NBA games. As good as LeBron is compared to other small forwards, Jordan is on another level when compared to other shooting guards.
Yeah.
He's darn near the top of every major statistical category, and there isn't a single
Yeah,
category
and the
where
top 10
LeBron
of
is better than
everything
MJ
except for
relative
free
to his
throws.
position, other than assists. So to sum up statistics, whether comparing traditional stats or analytics, and especially when judging these players in the context of the positions they played, Jordan has a noticeable edge over LeBron. As such, we have to give the check mark to Jordan. And that takes us to the last category in our GOAT analysis, the eye test.
The eye test.
And to be clear, by eye test, I don't mean which of these players is bigger, faster, or jumps higher. None of that is relevant unless we're having a track and field competition. And frankly, if physical measurables mattered, then George Murasan would be in the GOAT conversation. No, what I mean by the eye test is, if you sat an average basketball fan in front of a TV to watch a player in action, what would he notice that the player is and is not great at? Thankfully, I happen to be an average basketball fan, and I've had the privilege of watching both LeBron and Jordan during their playing days. So unlike a lot of my fellow YouTubers, I haven't merely relied on highlight videos. Here's what my eyes told me when I saw Michael Jordan play, particularly during his playing days with the Chicago Bulls. He was the best offensive player in the game, he was arguably the best defensive player in the game, he had the best mid-range game, he was the best finisher at the rim, he had the best post-up game, which is incredible considering most players who dominated the post were big men. He was widely considered the most clutch player in the game.
Oh, yeah.
He was regarded by opponents as the fiercest competitor on the court. He was regarded by teammates as the hardest worker in practice. And when all was said and done, amongst the other stars of his generation, he was the greatest winner. Now, when you're playing against the elite athletes of the world, to be the best at any one of those things is pretty remarkable. But to be the best at all of them, I tell you it's impossible, but for the fact that we saw Michael Jordan do it. And when it comes to the GOAT debate, that's the biggest hurdle facing LeBron. He's basically being compared to a guy who was great at everything and practically had no weaknesses.
Right.
Seriously, judging by the eye test, what's the worst thing we could say about Michael Jordan's game? Probably that he wasn't a very good three-point shooter. Jordan shot 33% from beyond the arc in an era when the average player also shot 33%.
That's still pretty
so
good,
when
though.
it came to three-point
Even though
shooting,
it's a low 30.
he wasn't good, he wasn't bad, he was just average. But remember that Michael played in an age when the three-point shot wasn't a big part of the game. During Jordan's years, teams averaged only 9.5 three-point attempts per game, and Michael himself attempted less than 2 threes per game.
And now,
And if being
teams
an
probably
average
average like
three-point shooter is a
17 a
weakness of
game.
Michael's game, well, then we also have to call it a weakness of LeBron's game. The
It
difference
is.
is that LeBron plays in an era where the three-point shot is a huge part of the game. During the years in which LeBron played, teams attempted on average over 21 threes per game, and LeBron himself averaged 4.3 three-point attempts per game, or 2.5 times as many as Jordan. Despite the increased emphasis on threes, LeBron's career shooting percentage from beyond the arc is only a hair better than Jordan, at 34%. And it's actually slightly below his peers, who averaged 35% from three during his era. But to reiterate, being an average three-point shooter was by far the worst part of MJ's game. For LeBron, it's not even close. LeBron, in fact, has 4 major weaknesses as a basketball player,
Flopping.
each of which is readily apparent to anyone who has actually watched him play. First, he's not a good free throw shooter.
I'm
For his
better
career,
than him.
LeBron has shot around 73.5% from the free throw line,
That's not good.
which
He's
is
gonna be
pretty poor
supposed
for
to
a
be the
player
GOAT.
who handles the ball as much as
Supposed
he
to be the
does.
GOAT.
In fact, many analysts point out that at the end of games, LeBron shies away from driving to the basket because he's afraid of being sent to the line.
That's crazy.
I don't know whether that's true, but what I do know is that the odds of LeBron hitting 2 consecutive free throws is statistically not much better than a coin flip. Jordan, on the other hand, shot a solid 83.5% from the free throw line during his career.
With his eyes closed.
And MJ never shied away from contact
Hell
at the
no.
end of games. LeBron's second weakness is that he's an inconsistent defender. Sure, he's had some years where he was elite defensively, which is evidenced by his
But he
numerous
wasn't consistent.
selections
Like
to
he
the
said,
NBA's
not consistent.
all-defensive
That's
team. But he's also
gotta
had
be
several
consistent.
years where he's practically been a liability on the defensive end.
And then he stopped.
Compare that
Oh
to
my
MJ,
God.
who during his Bulls days was a consistently elite defender. In fact, Jordan is the only player to rank in the top 5 amongst all guards in both steals per game and blocks per game for his career.
Damn.
Additionally, Michael led his position in defensive win shares practically every year that he played for the Bulls.
Look, he
an
didn't give up.
incredible 10 times.
Didn't give up.
LeBron, comparatively, has led his position in defensive
How's
win
he in the
shares on
paint?
just 4 occasions, and in 5 of his last 7 seasons, he didn't even crack the top 10 at his position in defensive
Oh
win
my
shares.
God, LeBron. That's
Now, some will excuse LeBron's recent
Well,
fall
LeBron's
off
not
on
my
the
GOAT.
defensive end as a byproduct of his resting on defense so that
Look
he
at
can
him,
have
look at
more
him.
energy on offense. And we can debate the merits of that strategy, but resting on defense is not something Michael Jordan was ever accused
oh
of doing.
no.
Heck, even as a 40-year-old, he was busting his tail on the defensive end.
Dang.
But what about the notion
Y'all
that
saw it.
LeBron's
Y'all
been
saw
a
it.
more versatile defender?
Two-man
LeBron
block.
supporters will argue that he can guard positions 1 through 5 on the court, such as when he guarded Derrick Rose for stretches in the 2011 playoffs. But LeBron's guarding the opposing team's point guard or center isn't something that happens very often. In fact, during his career, LeBron has spent less than 5% of his total minutes guarding the opposing player's 1 or 5. So the versatility argument is highly exaggerated. And look, when it comes to versatility, Hometown Buffet may have a more versatile menu than Spago. That doesn't make it a better restaurant. LeBron's third weakness is that he's not a very good shooter. And this is a pretty significant flaw for someone claiming to be the GOAT.
He's not-
I mean,
not
shooting
clutch.
the ball is the quintessential skill in the game of basketball. It's the part of the game that everyone practices, whether on the playground, at the YMCA, or in the NBA. Now, some people
What's
will contend
wrong?
that LeBron is actually a better shooter than Jordan because he has a better
Is my
career
laptop
field goal
messing up?
percentage. And yes, LeBron's
I thought
career
my
field
computer
goal
messed up.
percentage is 50.4% compared to Jordan's 49.7%. But recall what I said about placing stats into proper context. To help us understand context when it comes to shooting, allow me to introduce DeAndre Jordan and Tyson Chandler. We all know that DeAndre and Tyson were great rebounders and defenders, but what if I told you that they were also two of the greatest shooters of all time? That would be certifiably crazy. Yet if you look at all the shooting metrics, field goal percentage, effective field goal percentage, true shooting percentage, both of
All
these
their
guys
points
rank near
came
the
from
top
like
in
from
NBA
5
history.
feet from the goal.
Of course, there's an obvious reason for that.
5 feet and less.
As we all know, both DeAndre Jordan and Tyson Chandler take a lot of their shot attempts on dunks, layups, and putbacks,
Of
which are
course.
extremely high percentage shots. Well, guess what? So does LeBron James.
Yeah.
In fact, every single year of his career, the shot that LeBron James has taken the most has been within 0 to 3 feet from the basket. In other words, dunks, layups, and putbacks.
Ha-ha.
More than 1 of every 3 of LeBron's shots has been within this point-blank range, which is aided by his playing in an era where it's been relatively easy to get to the rim, particularly when compared to the physical era in which Jordan played. And just like every other player, LeBron is really effective from 0 to 3 feet, hitting over 73% of these shots. But how does LeBron fare from outside this range? According to basketballreference.com, LeBron's shooting percentage from outside 3 feet is 37.5%. It's even poorer in the playoffs where he shoots 35.9%. And it gets even worse in close and late situations. In the last 2 minutes of games where the score is within
30%.
5 points, LeBron hits only
That was
31.7%
close.
of his
Damn.
jumpers. Look, it doesn't take a rocket scientist to know that these numbers
I
aren't very
understand.
good, which is probably why in the 2013 finals, the Spurs' defensive strategy against the Heat was to basically dare LeBron James to shoot. And keep in mind, this was against LeBron in his prime. Can you imagine an opposing coach using a similar strategy against MJ?
No.
Now, LeBron actually credits the Spurs for forcing him to work on his jump shot, but it's not as if his results have gotten much better since then. Here's LeBron's shooting percentage from outside 3 feet over the last 6 years. Yikes. Well, I'll give him this, he is consistent. For comparison, consider that in the last year of Michael Jordan's career, as an aging player on the Washington Wizards, Jordan shot close to 42% from outside 3 feet. While that's certainly not great, it
Ooh.
means that even as a 40-year-old shell of his former self, Jordan was still a better shooter, a far better shooter than LeBron
That's
James.
crazy. At 40 years old.
Unfortunately, Basketball Reference doesn't have advanced shooting metrics from Michael's Bulls days, when he was a significantly more efficient scorer. But few would argue that Michael was anything but a lethal jump shooter when he was wearing red and black. When it comes to shooting, all of us can recall practicing shots on the blacktop, counting down 3, 2, 1,
Yep.
before
That's what
launching
you're
a
doing
shot
now?
at the rim. Well, if you were pretending to be LeBron James, you'd brick almost 2/3 of the time.
Yep.
Actually, that's not entirely true. If you were playing against a countdown, it would be much, much worse.
Another ad.
And that gets me to the last major weakness of LeBron's game, his
Travel.
performance,
Travel.
or more accurately, lack of performance, in the clutch. Remember
That was
when
a
people were
travel,
praising
man.
LeBron for making a couple of buzzer beaters in the playoffs 2 years ago? They used these stats to claim that LeBron was better in the clutch than Jordan. But look at these numbers carefully. What stands out to you? How about this? People were using a sample size of less than 1 shot per season to make the case that LeBron was more clutch than Jordan. That would be the equivalent of polling just 100 people in the country to try to predict the winner of the next presidential election. So let's use more telling stats, shall
This
we?
guy is good on these
Here's a
stats,
situation
man.
that's often used to determine a player's clutchness. 5 seconds to go in the fourth quarter or overtime, and your team needs a bucket to either win or tie the game. It answers the age-old question, who do you want taking the last shot with the game on the line? It turns out that in the regular season and playoffs combined, LeBron has taken 94 such shots. That's a pretty good sample size. And how many of those 94 shots has LeBron made?
20.
19.
I
For a
was
shooting
close.
percentage of 20%.
Damn.
Let me repeat that. 20%.
That's bad.
Guys, that's not bad in the clutch. That's atrocious. Michael Jordan in the same situation shot roughly 50%. Yes, that's right. Jordan's performance under pressure was the same as it was throughout the rest of the game.
This,
And that,
man,
my
this shit
friends,
giving me
is the
goosebumps. It give me
definition of
chills.
clutch.
So
So
he
there you
going
go.
deep,
When it
deep
comes to the
into
eye test,
these
our
stats and
eyes
stuff.
tell us that one player, Michael Jordan, is great at everything and has practically no weaknesses. And the other player, LeBron James, while also having a ton of strengths, has several obvious flaws to his game. And when all is said and done, after analyzing the 5 key factors of being the GOAT, Jordan gets 4 check marks to LeBron's 1, making this GOAT debate, well, not much of a debate at all.
Nah.
Now, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that LeBron James is a bad player.
No, he's not.
He's a phenomenal player. Personally, I have him on basketball's Mount Rushmore, along with Jordan, Kareem, Wilt Chamberlain, and Bill Russell. He's
What about
just
Bird?
not Michael Jordan. And just to underscore how good MJ was, let's ignore LeBron and Jordan for a minute and focus on the other 3 players highlighted here, Kareem, Wilt, and Bill Russell. Most would agree that these are the 3 greatest centers in NBA history,
Yeah.
and each of them has a strong case to justify his standing among basketball royalty. Wilt is an all-time great because he was an offensive force of nature, and he holds a ton of NBA records. Russell is in the conversation because he was a dominant defender and a perennial champion. Kareem also led his team to numerous titles, and in terms of individual awards and accolades, was the most decorated of the 3. Not to mention, he had the NBA's most unguardable shot. Now imagine a center that had all the best qualities from these 3 titans. A player like that would be the basketball equivalent of Thanos. Now
Yeah.
add to that player the highest level of intangible attributes, such as a tireless work ethic, unmatched killer instinct, and an ability to deliver in the clutch. And now you'd essentially be looking at Thanos with all of the Infinity Stones.
Jordan.
And no one would question whether this player was the greatest of all time. But the truth is, we don't have to imagine such a player. That player already existed. He
Jordan.
just happened to be a shooting guard, not a center.
Yeah.
When you think about it, Michael Jordan is the real-life version of an overpowered video game character. He had all the qualities we look for in a superstar athlete, and he had it in spades. He's basically Babe Ruth, if Babe Ruth played defense like Willie Mays. And that's why, even in comparison to the other all-time greats, he is truly in a class of his own. Simply put, he's the GOAT.
So there you have it. Jordan the GOAT. For everybody who watched the whole video, I appreciate it. If you made it this far, comment Smooth Squad down in the comment section. Let me know you watched the whole video. And there you have it, man. Jordan the GOAT. That was the longest video, man. Damn. LeBron the GOAT. Come on. Y'all gotta be tripping. Y'all kidding me.